Unthinkable! That was the outraged cry from some Hollywood insiders when whispers first surfaced about California's dramatic push to catapult its entertainment tax credit program to new heights. Picture the shocked faces in studio boardrooms across Los Angeles. Plenty of folks had assumed that the state's film incentives would remain capped where they had been for years, leaving many productions to seek greener pastures in Georgia or New York, almost without a second thought. Yet, here we are, with the state's legislature thrusting the spotlight back on the place that once represented the beating heart of the global film and television industry. Welcome, everyone, to this breakdown of California's newly supercharged pursuit of Hollywood glory. So, what's the real story here? And why has a seemingly routine legislative decision sent a thunderous echo through sound stages across the country? In today's piece, we dig into the motivations, the potential ramifications, and the behind-the-scenes drama of California's intensifying race to keep those cameras rolling on home turf. We will unpack how Governor Gavin Newsom's ambition leaped from a controversial idea to a signed priority, and how it could revolutionize where and how the biggest films and television series get made. In this comprehensive exploration, we will examine the roots of the state's film incentive program, its new expansions, and the possible crossroads Hollywood must confront next. Stay tuned, because by the end of this script, every question about these new tax credits will be answered. In this unfolding drama, we will delve into precisely why the entertainment industry matters so much to California's economic health, how new categories of film and television might flourish thanks to these changes, and whether this surge of state support can truly outshine the uncapped competition from other regions. We will also look closely at some staggering losses in Los Angeles-related production in recent years, the lobbying efforts of powerful unions, and the new synergy between public officials and studio executives that some say came just in the nick of time. Finally, we will explore whether any hidden pitfalls lurk beneath the cheerful headlines. Ready to follow the money like never before? Let's roll camera. It is years of friendly and sometimes not so friendly rivalry that have kept Hollywood's creative community perpetually aware of the greener, or, ironically, more financially decorated, pastures outside California. For the better part of 2 decades, states like Georgia have stolen some of the luster once owned unapologetically by Hollywood. New York, too, has deployed its own powerful set of incentives, wooing production companies with the promise of ample credits and fewer regulatory burdens. Meanwhile, Louisiana and other states jumped into the ring with programs that seemed tailor-made to attract certain niche productions, notably smaller indie films hungry for any feasible cost-saving measure. Over time, it became a swirl of competition, with each region brandishing its specific sweeteners to lure sets away from Tinseltown. As the years rolled by, California's original film incentive program, initiated back in 2009, appeared to be falling behind in that arms race. Studios that once would never have dreamed of leaving LA discovered they could slash budgets by filming out of state, even if it meant uprooting staff for months at a time. Blockbuster movie sets gradually deserted the sunny backlots, and major television series took their high-profile productions elsewhere, all in the quest for better financial deals. There were, of course, attempts to strengthen California's offering. Occasional expansions did help, especially in the face of blowout successes across the border, but the momentum never quite felt robust enough to match the unstoppable fervor of other states. Then, in the fall of 2024, a glimmer of possibility emerged. Governor Gavin Newsom, never shy about courting the attention of the entertainment sector, declared that the corporate exodus had to stop. While some saw this pronouncement as purely symbolic, the proposed legislation soon crystallized around a bold plan to nearly double the existing annual tax credit allocation, taking it from $330 million up to $750 million. This was, and still is, a tremendous jump, even in the context of Hollywood's notoriously giant budgets. Want to finish that blockbuster epic or produce a string of prestige dramas without blowing your overhead? California now wanted to make that path far more viable, effectively telling producers, "We want you to stay, and we will put our money where our mouth is." The script then pivoted from fantasy to reality as legislators hammered out the particulars in the corridors of power. From the get-go, Newsom's proposal was met with both praise and suspicion. Skeptics believed this might be another flighty promise, doomed to vanish once the political winds shifted. Others pinned their hopes on the notion that an enlightened policy shift could spark a renaissance in the very place that first gave birth to the film industry. The tension was as potent as a top-tier drama, with industry insiders devouring every scrap of legislative gossip. For months, backers of the new approach worked tirelessly to gather support from union leaders, local business owners dependent on regular production spending, and even from everyday citizens keen to preserve or expand employment opportunities in a region historically linked to show business. Eventually, the measure surged through the state assembly, winning by a margin of 64-1, and soared through the Senate by a count of 31-3. The Entertainment Union Coalition, which had thrown considerable weight behind the measure, hailed these developments as proof of just how central this industry remains to California's economy. For them, it was a sweet victory. They had lobbied tirelessly to show precisely how such incentives fuel job creation beyond the glitzy sets. From carpenters to caterers, from costume designers to drivers, a production invests in thousands of local workers, not to mention the countless small companies that rely on a steady flow of on-location projects to pay the bills. Before we continue, let me share the first of two quick requests. If you appreciate hearing about the underpinnings of our favorite shows and how public policy often determines their fate, consider staying connected and sharing this deep dive with your fellow film enthusiasts. It helps us keep the lights on and encourages more explorations like this one. The next phase of intrigue centers around the expansion's exact mechanics. The new program, if fully enacted by the cutoff date of July 7th, will offer a bigger base rate, 35% for certain productions. That leap is intended to balance out the rising costs of filming in a place where union wages and location fees are among the highest in the country. Meanwhile, we are told that shorter television episodes, animated series, sitcoms, and even certain competition shows will now qualify for these credits. As always, there are specific exclusions. Reality TV, documentary programming, and talk or game shows must still look elsewhere for state-backed assistance. Moreover, a high-profile requirement that used to give a separate incentive for soundstage construction is changing. In the past, a production or production facility had to own more than half of its sound stages or sign a lease for at least a decade to earn that extra credit. That stipulation is being phased out, presumably in the hope that emerging or smaller-scale producers who cannot commit to such large real estate deals can still tap into some benefits. The end result is that California's new program attempts to meet an evolving industry halfway, infusing it with more flexibility. If you are curious whether this will turn the Golden State into an unassailable champion of production in the near future, consider that Georgia and New York still stand tall with their own extremely appealing offerings. Georgia's is famously uncapped, meaning there is no strict upper limit on the amount that can be dished out as a tax credit. Similarly, New York remains quite generous, and many producers have found it highly welcoming. The question, might various forms of TV content in particular, from series to streaming specials, find an irresistible reason to cluster back in Los Angeles? For supporters of California's approach, that is the dream. Studios flocking back to Glendale, Burbank, and Santa Monica, revitalizing iconic local filming spots, and restamping the region's authority as the epicenter of global entertainment. We must also heed the cautionary voice of skeptics, who point to high logistics costs, possible unpredictability in the political climate, and competition from emerging markets. Plus, there is that lingering question about how above-the-line costs remain largely excluded from these incentives. High-profile salaries for A-list actors, top directors, and star producers form a massive chunk of many budgets. So, limiting those bigger paychecks from the creditable expenses can dampen the overall attractiveness of these initiatives. In truth, many large production decisions revolve around how best to accommodate those star-studded, high-salary deals. For instance, a project might do well using local set designers and prop builders, but if multiple big-name cast members command staggering amounts, another region with more flexible guidelines might still sweep them away. What cannot be denied is that California has been losing ground in the fight for production business. Early in the year, a nonprofit group called Film LA, which oversees film permits for both the city and county of Los Angeles, revealed that overall on-location shooting had dropped by more than 22% from January through March, compared to the same period the previous year. Some see that precipitous dip as the canary in the coal mine, a glaring signal that other states' incentives have been winning. The new meltdown in local filming was deeply worrying for business owners dependent on consistent action in backlots. From the corner coffee shop that reaps a quick windfall during every production lunch break to the specialized equipment rental houses that have historically thrived in LA territory. And then, looming over it all, was the knowledge that Texas recently approved an additional $100 million in funding, specifically to entice movies and TV series every couple of years. This means that states with either bigger or more lenient budgets have been ramping up the arms race, leaving California at risk of missing out on an entire generation of filmmaking. Brow-raising expansions, like those in Texas, combined with the seductive unlimited potential in Georgia, have made it more urgent than ever that California significantly up its game. By raising the total annual cap to $750 million, California's new plan will hit an overall figure of around $1.5 billion in incentives over the next decade, through 2035. Even hardened cynics who shrugged at earlier expansions see the significance in these numbers. But is it enough? With the threat of large-scale migration still looming, some claim that the state may eventually have to loosen its policy on above-the-line expenses if it wants to truly surpass the other production powerhouses. That remains an open question, and if the meltdown in local filming keeps accelerating, it may become a renewed legislative debate in the coming years. One aspect that cannot be overlooked is the extent to which the Entertainment Union Coalition stood at the forefront of lobbying for these changes. They hammered home the argument that every time a production decamps to a more incentive-friendly region, thousands of local families take a hit. As the coalition sees it, the creative workers who actually make filmmaking possible, grips, camera operators, costumers, production designers, location scouts, have the most to lose if the industry fails to remain anchored in California. It is not merely about star actors or mega directors. Rather, it is the bedrock workforce that stands to suffer the immediate consequences, whether they are job losses or forced relocations. In many respects, this line of reasoning found a sympathetic ear among legislators. High-profile union members traveled to Sacramento, shared personal stories of job scarcity when production volumes dipped, and effectively convinced lawmakers that ramping up efforts was more than just a subsidy. It was an investment in the state's overarching well-being. The result was this historic shift in budget priorities, which soared through the legislative branches. With the measure now aiming to be fully implemented, we may yet see these rhetorical victories translate into very real transformations across the local production scene. The time crunch is pressing, however. Everyone with a potential project on deck is rushing to finalize the necessary paperwork in time for the new measure's formal introduction before July 7th. That date marks the close of the incentive's next application window, meaning that any production seeking to capitalize on the new scale of benefits needs to have its ducks in a row by then. The shortness of this deadline has created a sense of near panic for some studios. Can they pull their teams together in time? Will the new definitions and categories match their project's needs? Or must they scramble to alter scripts and shooting schedules to become eligible under the expanded guidelines? Of course, there is also the sticky reality that legislation can sometimes overshadow practical realities on set. Signing a new program into law and actually handing out those credits are two different processes. Bureaucratic hurdles often appear, with endless documentation, eligibility proofs, and further compliance checks. The fervor behind the measure suggests that lawmakers will strive to streamline the process, but the real test will come when entire waves of applications flood the system. If the state grapples with reams of paperwork and production houses are left in limbo, some of that initial excitement could sour. And what about the rest of the country? Observers are carefully watching how other states respond. Already, there has been chatter that some might tweak their existing programs in response to California's latest moves. An arms race in film incentives certainly keeps production houses on their toes, but it also raises concerns that, inevitably, the cost of chasing that next big production might become unsustainable for states with smaller budgets. Some economists worry that the fierce competition among states might lead to diminishing returns over time. Yet for major players in the entertainment sector, the alternatives can be thrilling. More choice, more creative autonomy, and greater freedom to select ideal shooting locations. At the UCLA Entertainment Symposium, D.D. Myers, a senior advisor to Governor Newsom, extolled the virtues of the overhaul. She argued that the program not only pays for itself with the infusion of productions, but also creates even more economic activity in tangential industries. If that argument holds water, then the new measure might indeed be a sterling win for local communities. Cameras rolling in a once quiet district can open the door for a cascade of commerce, from local shops to hotels, restaurants, and security services, further boosting the region's economic impetus. Consider the intangible benefits as well. California's reputation as the cradle of cinematic magic has taken some dents in recent years, with streaming behemoths forging alliances in other corners of the country. Televised events, series featuring marquee talent, and prestige pictures alike have grown comfortable with the notion that wherever the tax break is bigger, the production will go. By reminding the world that California is still very much in the race and upping the financial ante, the state reasserts itself as the spiritual heart of the film world. That intangible sense of belonging and tradition might also nudge certain creators to remain loyal, and loyal creators can be worth their weight in gold when they have final say on a project's location. Lest we forget, however, the storyline is far from concluded. Filmmakers, especially those behind more budget-conscious independent projects, will be the real litmus test for these new incentives. Can smaller production companies truly reap the rewards, or will the biggest corporate players, with their massive budgets and legal teams, soak up the lion's share? Will the addition of animated series or shorter episodic content open the floodgates for more startups to get a foothold in the industry, or will the qualification process prove overly complicated for them? These fundamental questions hover over the coming months, which promise to be an exceptionally active test phase for the retooled program. All eyes are on the next round of feedback from productions that manage to secure credits under the new plan. If their experiences reflect real savings and improved logistics, we might see a wave of testimonials that encourage more filmmakers to stick around or come back. But if the procedure proves cumbersome, or if the restrictions on above-the-line salaries remain too limiting, the industry's restless migration patterns could simply continue. Everyone from top showrunners to grassroots crew members has a stake in seeing how it all plays out. At this point, you have surely gleaned that the fortunes of California's bright lights-drenched domain are far from certain, but also that there is now a powerful impetus to lure at least a share of the drifting creative community back into the fold. If you are enjoying this breakdown and appreciate peeling away the layers of how movies truly get made, I would invite you, just this second of 2 times, to let others know you are along for this ride. Share this script, subscribe to the conversation, or drop your thoughts about whether the Golden State can win the long game. Filmmaking is a business, but also an iconic American storytelling tradition, and so the emotional weight of whether or not California can remain its undisputed home has stirred many hearts in the local community. You can sense the fervor from Glendale to Malibu. Individuals want to believe that the imaginative electricity of Hollywood still belongs right here. The legislature's move to triple-check the budget for film incentives is, in part, a rallying cry to preserve not just an industry, but a cultural identity observed the world over. With the era of streaming now entrenched, and an insatiable content demand from global audiences, the stakes are higher than ever. The newly expanded threshold, from $330 million to $750 million per year, represents one bold step among many that might stabilize the future of a city that sometimes seems to teeter on the edge of losing its iconic status. By offering an improved environment for film and television creation, California invests in a legacy while trying to ensure economic growth for the next generation. It is both a gamble and a statement of faith in what Hollywood can yet become. Even so, the real fireworks will happen once these incentives make their day-to-day, behind-the-scenes impact. Look for announcements of major blockbusters returning to LA after years of filming east of the Mississippi. Watch how local businesses that teetered on the verge of bankruptcy may suddenly find themselves with so much new production-related traffic that they barely keep up. Pay attention to the next wave of soundstage innovations, freed from old constraints requiring lengthy ownership or decades-long leases. When we zoom out, we see a thrilling synergy of labor advocates, entrepreneurs, politicians, and creative talents converging on a single question: can California retake that starring role as the cradle of film and television in the modern era? The newly minted tax credit expansions certainly suggest that a substantial number of leaders believe the answer is yes. Looking ahead, watchers and dreamers alike will wait to see if adjustments to above-the-line exclusions or further expansions become part of the conversation to keep the state's promise truly competitive. In the meantime, Unions hope that the gestural generosity from state government is matched by studios who continue to reinvest in the people and communities that made Hollywood a worldwide phenomenon. The invitation is clear. Let us shoulder some of the cost, so you will do what you do best. Make movie magic right here, where the hills once echoed with the earliest silent pictures. Only time will tell if these efforts bear the fruit that so many have clamored for. Yet, for the first time in several years, a spark of optimism has undeniably returned. So ends our deep journey into California's newly emboldened tax credit story, fueled by powerful legislation and the will of labor organizations. Has the stage been perfectly set for a Hollywood comeback of epic proportions? Are we about to witness a wave of new pilot orders, film tours, and local spin-offs, lighting up places like Venice Beach and Glendale once again? Whatever the outcome, the consensus is that this moment counts for a great deal. If the new credits create a surge of jobs and production spending, we could see a revival that reaffirms Los Angeles' role as the shining star of movie making. If not, an even more radical transformation might lie in store, ushering in a new chapter in which major studios finally cut the cord and operate primarily from other states. But for now, the director's chair is set right back where so much cinematic history was made, and an atmosphere of possibility hangs in the air. Lights, camera, California.